right, all right. It is Friday night, February 16th, 2024. And if you have just joined us, you have just sat down at the Pastor's Round Table. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening.
Good
Evening,
Roger, I think
evening.
you're on mute.
We're so excited to be here. Yeah, I think I just came off of mute, so
we got you now.
Was too excited to be in the place.
All right,
Wow.
Gentlemen, it's been a real treat to be here. We're excited about this season 8 of Pastor's Roundtable, and this season, season 8 has fallen in a grand time to be sharing what ministry means to so many, and this Black History series has definitely been a keeper.
Man, listen, if you've missed anything in this month, in the month of February, we want you to know that it's not like the days old where if you just missed it, you missed it. You can go back on the archives here on Facebook or on YouTube, or you can go and visit the Pastor's Roundtable website, the prt.live, and you can go into the archives and check out what you missed in this month of February. As you can see over to I always get this wrong. I got it right this time, though. Over there, over that way, the month of February. We began the month talking about the white church and Black history. Powerful conversation. A lot of information that was shared there. You want to make sure you go back and see that. And then the second week in February, Dr. Henry, that's the one you were at or not? That's the one?
No, the second week of February, I was at that one, and that was last week. And last week we had a powerful discussion. John Boston was here, Pastor Montgomery, and they opened up our eyes on ministry and how we need to do it effectively, securing different partnerships in the community. It was powerful last week.
Yeah, if there's an episode of Pastor's Roundtable that you did not want to miss, it was, you want to, well, besides tonight, it was that one. You want to make sure that you go back and check that one out. Great ideas, great inspiration, great stories. You want to motivate your church to get out and get mobile and be effective and be relevant in your community. Make sure that you go back and check out last week's Pastor's Roundtable. Dr. Henry, there's something right now, before we go any further, that we need to ask. I almost want to wait a minute or two. Because I want to make sure that everybody hears this. I see 25 folk have joined us at this point. 25.
Yeah. Well, we want to say, first of all, we want to say hello to Beverly Rachel from the Ceres Church in California. I was just there, and my brother-in-law was ordained to the gospel ministry.
Yeah.
So, Beverly Rachel there. All right.
Yes, indeed.
Nice.
I didn't have that window up. I wasn't seeing anybody in the chat. There we are. Stephanie Scott is there. Good evening, Steph. Beverly Rachel. Hey, Dr. Dwain Woode is in the chat this evening. Good stuff.
He's double dipping.
Yes, indeed. Oh, we got to work on that a little bit there.
All right. We have about 29 people.
Let's move on.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we see 29 people pass away. Go ahead.
You ready, Dion, for your spot?
Yes, Dion.
I think I'm ready.
You have the privilege of sharing with them what you always share.
All right. Listen, you know what? I like to share. There's certain things I like to share, right? And I want to share this thought with you. It's time to share, right? Please, this is a great episode. We are talking about, I don't want to give away the topic tonight, but this is a great episode. This is something that you want I'm going to give a little teaser here. You want your hospitality leader to be on here. You want your pastor to be on here. You want your husband or your wife to be on here. You want the family to be on here because this is a great episode. So please, you want to share this episode. Share it with the person that you're going to go to Thanksgiving and hang out with. Share it to the person that you're about to have July the 4th with. Share it with the person who you're about to have Memorial Day weekend with, right? Share, and do more sharing.
He said, everybody that's coming to the cookout, share it with them. All right. Well, we're just, again, excited to be with you, each and every one of you tonight. Thank you for joining us at the Pastors Roundtable. Very quickly, Roger, we usually do this midpoint. We're going to do it twice tonight. I mentioned a place that people could go to find out a little bit more about the Pastors Roundtable, but can you elaborate on that just a little bit more? What will they find when they go? We'll repeat first what we'll find, and then just talk to us about that.
Well, listen, if you are watching on Facebook and YouTube, you already know how to find us. But there's a place where you can go unfiltered and see every single episode that we have done here at Pastors Roundtable. And that's at our website, theprt.live, So you can go there. You can see every episode. There are some show notes, which has resources from each of our episodes. And they're down on the bottom of the page. You can support Pastors Roundtable. Hit the support button, and you are welcome to support Pastors Roundtable however you feel comfortable in doing that. If you are enjoying this season, these shows, we invite you to join us to partner with Pastors Roundtable, where we strive to make ministry relevant, resourced, and real.
All right. I see Stephanie saying the 150th episode of PRT is coming. Man, that's a lot of episodes, y'all.
Oh,
wow.
100. Yeah. Wait. 150 episodes?
You're 150 episodes years
that's
old.
Amazing.
Years old, episodes old, Dion. Hey, I see LaDonia Gilmore saying she enjoyed service last week. Come on now.
Awesome.
All right. Praise
excellent.
The Lord.
And there's my good. My mother's in the chat, Shaki Patrick, from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. So we thank her. This helps me to know she's doing all right. We're always excited to have our PRT viewers who are regulars. We see Karen Hutchins Black in the chat today, and we are excited to have her. And then we're excited to have new folks who join us here at the Pastors Roundtable.
Absolutely. Dion, we got work to do, man. Because every time we come here, I see Roger's mama in the chat, and you and me, we had to adopt her. I don't see your mom in the chat. Right. Tell her I'm calling her out.
No.
And while I'm calling your mama out, I got to call my own mama out. She's probably going to see this.
Well, you know what? But you know what? There's one thing, though. At least they watch us afterwards, right? At some point, they'll see us.
And
right?
My mom does that. Yeah. Now I'm gonna get in trouble. All right, listen. All right, let's get to it, man. We got a lot of time is getting away from us. It is 8:10. Again, if you have not shared, we invite you to do so. We want to hop into this chat tonight. We've talked about what was on the table before. Dr. Henry, you tell us. You told us why they needed to come, but why don't you go ahead and spill those beans? What is on the table tonight? And then we're gonna ask Roger Wade to tell us who is at the table tonight. So what's on the table?
Yeah, I like you said, spill the beans, right?
There you go. Yeah.
I watch you, preacher. Well, listen, a couple of years ago, we had a show called Slave Food, and it was powerful. We had a lot of people that chimed in, and we said, you know what? We want to bring that back again to talk about slave food. What is slave food? What does it mean about how we eat and how it impacts our church and our community? And so that is on the table tonight.
All right. And Pastor Wade, who is at the table tonight, man?
Well, man, I'm glad you asked. We are just so excited to have, as Dr. Henry shared about the Slave Food Project, we have the hosts of the Slave Food Project, the folks who came up with the idea and started to make you think, when it comes to what is this slave food. We have Dr. Columbus Baptiste with us.
What?
He practices out in California, and we're just excited that he's here. He's going to drop some knowledge on what slave food and the impact it has on Black health. Along with him is another good friend of ours who I had the privilege of connecting with at our last camp meeting here in South Central Conference. He practices, he's a doctor also, and practices in Huntsville, Alabama, and he is a extraordinaire. He's in this same space with us on internet, and has a podcast, a regular weekly podcast, and we're just excited to have Dr. Dwain Woode with us.
All right, well, let's bring them on. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome. We are glad. Oh, look at there. We are excited to have you guys with us this evening. Thank you for taking the time out on a Friday evening to join us here at the Pastors Roundtable. We're going to have a quick word of prayer with our guests and with our audience, and then we're going to give our guests just a quick opportunity to tell us just a little bit more about themselves and where they are and what they're doing. Pastor Wade, would you just offer that word of prayer and we'll get kicking here?
Yes, let's pray. Father, we thank you for your love, your mercy, and your grace. We thank you for allowing us to meet in this medium that we may share information that you have provided. Be with our guests, be with our viewers, and Father, we pray that your name will gain glory, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, Dr. Baptiste, you are an alum now of the Pastors Roundtable, the PRT, but we're going to begin with you. Just for those of our audience who don't know as much about you as we do, we're going to give you just a few moments just to share just a little bit about where you are, what you're doing, and maybe even throw in a little bit more about the Slave Food Project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, first of all, gentlemen, it's wonderful to see you all again. And I hope this year is treating you well and you're happy and healthy and wiser too as well since the last time that I spoke with you. So I'm Columbus Baptiste. I am an interventional cardiologist. I'm based in Southern California, grown there. I'm alumnus of Oakwood University and Loma Linda University as well. And I'll tell you that my transition into this area of nutrition, like many, was predicated upon watching many individuals suffer with illness and disease and looking within our community to really explore why. And that was really the nidus for the Slave Food Project, was really uncovering the reason why we see this growing disparity that's there. And there's no month better than Black History Month, where we have this collision between heart health and between a reflection on those of African descent, and seeing, well, why are we living the way that we are? And so it's a pleasure to be here, working on a couple other things I'll just touch on briefly here too as well. We'll have to touch on this for sure during this conversation, but the HELP conference, such an important thing where we're looking at the solution to the Slave Food Project, is really comes in the form of the HELP conference that's coming on March 24th through 26th. And then you'll have to have me back on. I won't take up time during this show for my upcoming book called Selfish, Cardiologist's Guide to Curing a Stressed and Broken Heart. So those are the things I've been working on since we last spoke.
Oh, that's fascinating. Nice. And of course, we are excited and delighted to have Dr. Woode with us. Dr. Woode, again, we did not read your full bio and tell everybody everything, but we're just going to give you a little time here just to share with our audience a little bit about you and what you're doing and what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Well, gentlemen, I'm equally as excited to be here. I've watched you from afar, but glad to be on the stage with you and in such good company. I am an endocrinologist by training, so hormones are the things that I take care of. The most common hormone that everyone knows is insulin, because that's one of the big things that we see in diabetes, with 460 million people around the world, 37 million in the country that suffer from diabetes. It is a huge pandemic-sized disease, which predisposes to all kinds of other issues, as Dr. Baptiste was talking about: heart disease, strokes, kidney disease, amputations, blindness, and so forth. And my venture into the online space actually came as a result of my personal struggle in that area, and with also seeing people in the community suffering at length. And so I'm just excited to be here and to be able to talk about this particular topic, because often we don't see our food, our information covered at length. And this is a great opportunity and month to do that.
Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right. Pastor Wade, you're going to take us in, man.
All right. Let's take off. Let's take off, gentlemen. Thank you again for joining us here. And I'm going to reach out to Dr. Baptiste and ask you this question. You've been on PRT before, and you came and shared about slave food, which was a novel concept for many of our viewers at the time in understanding the types of food as African Americans while in slavery would have access to, which now leads us to where we end up. Give us a little history that has been taught about the way we eat based on the findings you've had through the Slave Food Project.
Yeah, no, and first I have to give a little shout out to my partner in crime as it relates to slave food, and Eric Walsh, who's unable to be here tonight, but I'm thankful to have Dr. Woode here with us and with me as well. And so, when we look back at slave food, and I think history is so important. As physicians, one of the first things that we do after we assess that there is a problem, what we call the subjective, is we then turn to what's the past medical history, what's the past social history, the past surgical history, because it builds a picture of the current state and allows us an avenue to understand how we need to intervene. And so when we look back at our history of those who have been enslaved, we understand that we were given the foods that were refuse, the foods that were cast off, and that this cycle continued and perpetuated throughout the period of enslavement, even through the period of Great Migration, where you were isolated and you lived in small areas where you had minimal resources. You still were unable to really truly tap into the foods that were sustaining. And then we move over into the current state as well. But, one of the things that we bring up when we look at the enslaved foods that we were given, the refuse, the things that were thrown off and cast off, is we also talk about the resiliency of those who were enslaved. And oftentimes when we look at how we honor that period of time, and we call it soul food, we reflect on, hey, we learned to make lemonade out of lemons. We learned how to go ahead and create something out of those cast off foods. But the one thing that we fail to recognize is that many of the enslaved grew crops. They worked after tilling the ground for the slave owners, their own gardens, to supplement their nutrition, and fruits and vegetables and various things like that. And so when we begin to really look at what was built in the resiliency of these individuals who were enslaved, why they lived long, we're starting to understand the fact that, hey, they looked at collard greens and mustards and grew and had the berries, and they were able to tap into those things that were resiliency. And so that's when I look at slave food as a whole, it ultimately boils down to one definition we came up throughout the course, and that is it is the manipulation of nutrition for profit and for power. And so when we begin this process of manipulating nutrition in order to redirect minds and to make you just strong enough just to continue to work, but too sick to fight back, that we shift our minds right now on the foods that we're eating right now in this current modern day enslavement, that now we live in crucibles of conflict, riddled with stress and with foods that are not nutritious for us. Right? That these processed, ultra processed foods that melt in our mouth, not in our hands, we become enslaved once again to now our desires that have been crafted by the food manufacturing companies that once again manipulate nutrition for profit and for power.
Wow. That's a whole lot to chew on there. Excuse the pun. But yet that history of what we've seen through the years develop, and you mentioned something, Dr. Baptiste, that I want to throw to both of you as just kind of a follow-up to that. Does And I think we've got some of this coming on. I'm going to hold it because I know this question is coming later. So I'm going to hold that. But Dr. Woode, anything you want to add to that? As you think about just the history, what have we learned about the history, about the way that we eat, and maybe how it impacts some of the things that impact your field specifically?
Well, I think it's a wonderful point to be made, to add to what was said, that a lot of what we do in terms of treating diseases today are predicated on the fact that African Americans, sometimes we have higher incidence of certain diseases, right? And I really appreciate all the studies that have been done that sometimes will show that, yeah, we have a higher rate of diabetes or hypertension or coronary artery disease. But one of the things that we've got to remember, and I don't think this is talked about a lot, someone can have a predisposition for something, but
Mm-hmm.
if you don't put them in the environment that exploits that predisposition, it doesn't happen.
Oh, wow.
So I can be someone who is predisposed to diabetes, but if you keep me in an environment that doesn't expose me to the risk factors for diabetes,
Oh,
I
wow.
never get diabetes.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we were taken from an environment where we were thriving, put into an environment that exploited the predisposition, if that's what it is. And then now we are blamed because we developed a disease, which was a natural consequence of the ripping away of our natural foods, giving us substandard foods, and then now denying access to a lot of our people to things that are good and beneficial for them.
Wow. That's
Wow.
fascinating.
Yeah, I know just a follow up to that real quick
Yep.
before we get to the next question. And I know we covered this a couple of years ago when we talked about slave food project. But can you just tell us some of those foods that we consider are slave foods? I know we talked about it a couple of years ago, but just to bring it back, just to bring it back at the forefront, Dr. Baptiste, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
when we look at we look at these foods that really they cause stress to our body. When we look at ultimately what the scenario is, when we look at the foods that were cast off,
Get my
these were
organ
the
ready.
refuge. They were. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. These are going to be, going back to the enslaved period. We're looking at the intestines. We're looking at the parts of the animals that were cast off literally for trash, for the animals to eat, is what we were given many times. With a few ears of corn, a few things that Frederick Douglass spoke about, really the perilous effects of the foods that were really delivered to us. As we moved and we learned and we crafted these things in chitlins, and we started making neck bones and hog feed and everything of that sort, we started putting, and we added it to our collard greens, and we added it to our red beans, and we started making these dishes that all of a sudden we created this cuisine that became a staple. It became a Southern cuisine because we were oftentimes the cooks, the chefs on the plantations, obviously, as well. As we moved and we transitioned, these things were carried on into the church dinners, right?
Oh,
Where you
my.
got
Mm.
Oh,
best
my.
and your best, right? And so all of a sudden, this culture began where you brought the best on those occasions.
Oh,
You dressed your best, and you brought all these foods that you began to partake of in this church potluck here,
Oh,
right?
you
and,
hurting us,
and,
Doc. It's Black History Month, man. You're messing
and
with our
I'm
culture. You're messing with our.
listen.
Whoa.
Well, we'll see. And so the question is to pull up. I know you guys are a little bit holier than I am, a lot holier than I am, but I watch movies. And so this Wakanda, it's almost like Wakanda. It's like, remember who you are.
Yeah,
Remember who you are. You're more than just right now in this moment of the period of
Mm.
enslaved. You go back further than that, back to West Africa. And what's so
Ooh.
interesting about that is when you look at the food and the culture and the richness of the foods and the spices that are there in continents apart from America, you see that there is a predominance of plant-rich foods, a multicolored of spices that enrich the body and feed the soul as well. It's true version of soul food. And so when we look at that, science has basically told us now in here, even if you look at the transition along the lines of the transatlantic slave trade, you see that hypertension rises. We understand that African Americans have the highest burden of cardiovascular disease, specifically hypertension. We understand that it starts in West Africa, it's lower than the Caucasian population in America. It rises gradually as you get to the West Indies, and it rises to its peak inside the United States. It tells us that there is something else that's going on. There's something else that's amiss, that's making, it's not genetic, it's not our DNA that's causing this. There are other factors at play inside our disease burden.
This is going to be a terrible, terrible, terrible analogy and joke, but it's almost like, it's not even really a joke, but I'm remembering the Roots movie, and the master saying, "What's your name?" And he said, "Plant-based whole foods." "What's your name?" "Plant-based whole foods." But he whipped into him, ham hocks and chitlins. And it's like, yeah, that was a cultural shift, not just in the name of how they named people, Black peoples here, but even how the whole dietary culture had to conform to the slave master and the colonial mindset. That's wow.
So I want to ask in terms of, and I don't know if Dr. Wood, you wanted to add to the concept. I know you deal more with the medication or the medical side of the diseases. I don't know if you want to add some color to what Dr. Baptiste shared.
Well, I think I do want to add something. So not only were we in slavery given the scraps from the master's table, but we weren't even allowed to cultivate the better part of what we needed. So, we were given the hens and the chickens that were probably sickly. We were given a piece of ground to maybe plant a little garden. And so the ability for us to grow was hampered. And remember, when we were fed, it was kind of like getting a hog, right? So you gave the hog just the food that it needed to get fat, but not to nourish it. And so we were given just enough to help us work, but not enough to really sustain us and make us strong. And so that's the history that we are coming from now, and it has done a tremendous job of keeping us, and we'll talk, I guess, a little bit later about what it not just does to the body, but also does to the mind.
So let's talk about, we've talked about kind of the history of this thing. So Dr. Wood, when we talk about, in light of the history of some, I know we just kind of went just on the surface of the history, but from what we do know of the history, what are some of the keys that we need now to kind of make a shift or to unlock some of the healthier eating habits? And then Dr. Baptiste, if you'd be prepared to take a stab at that as well. Where do we go from here?
Wow. This question is so multifaceted. So everyone talks about education, right? Education, accessibility, and community support. That's kind of where all the programs that you look at have gone. The problem with education is that, and I'm going to maybe get in trouble here for saying that, the education continues to be Eurocentric.
Okay.
The education. So, for instance, when I see a patient in the office, my education to them is what I have been taught in this environment. So I take someone, and I'm going to grab someone that's not from the United States. I'll take somebody from the diaspora. I'll take someone from the Caribbean, or someone from Haiti, or someone from one of the Latin American countries, right? That people got dropped off as well. And we take this person and we bring them into the office, and we say to them, next week when you come back, I need you to be eating in this centric diet. And we negate, and yes, slave-free food was bad, and we had all this stuff that is causing disease, but we give them something that they are totally ill-prepared to cook, eat, or it's not palatable to them. We send them away, we bring them back, and when they come back and they have not done what we've told them because we've not really taught them, we say they are non-adherent, right? And so basically, we're blaming the victim for the thing that we've caused. So education has to be much deeper than just, hey, here's this plate method, here's this pyramid method like we used to have before. Go back and cut back on these carbs and go to the gym. It has to be a lot more than that. So education has to be deeper. It has to be rooted in the culture of the person that we're talking about. Accessibility, right? So we've got cities that are crowded. We've got cities where you can't get the things that we're telling people that they should eat. And then when they go home and they don't eat those things, once again, we blame them for not having, we say they're not concerned. Well, if you've got to make a decision between paying the bills and buying, whatever kind of food we're telling them, you decide, hey, I've got to pay the bills and I'm going to buy the best thing I can for my kids because I've got 2 of them there. I need them to be able to eat. And then community support. And we'll talk about the church in a minute because the church is a huge part of where we need to be. So when we talk about what do we need to do, what do we need in order for us to move on, we need deeper and more rich education. We need accessibility more than just, hey, let me put this store on the corner so you can get, some greens. And we need to have a robust community support system.
Wow. Very, very, very thorough answers in that and reaching across those things. I want to come back. I got to make a note to myself and ask some questions about the first part, but I do want to give Dr. Baptiste an opportunity here to jump in on this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Wood. That was all inclusive. The one thing I'd add is really a statement that came out of one of our slave food shows was really about the business of business is business. And so we understand that just for coming out this artificial American holiday called the Super Bowl weekend. And one of the things that most people enjoy the most from Super Bowl weekend is watching the commercials that stimulate food and eating food. And these cues that are constantly placed in front of us. And so we understand that this market of big food is there with the intention of creating sales, of creating money. And so we understand that this advertisement that starts inside of childhood in elementary school with brand recognition of sodas that are placed inside of are visible, of certain types of foods, of pizzas, of various things that are there, of brand recognition that are placed strategically there and predominantly inside of communities of color. We understand that advertisement is targeted, not just advertisement on television, and we understand the disproportionate degree of advertisement that hits Black and brown communities, but they have taken it to a new level, that they are doing it in gaming systems that they advertise. They pay individuals, gamers, in order to advertise certain things. They do it on social media of advertising that subconsciously taps into our psyche, that drives us towards foods that now have vanishing calories. They have that crunch factor. They have the taste that all of a sudden we don't appreciate the amount of calories that we're taking in. And they satisfy us and they trap us inside this thing called the motivational triad. And that motivational triad is where we're trying to avoid pain. We're seeking pleasure and we're trying to conserve energy. And what's the easiest way to do that than going through the drive-through, no energy, swipe the card, get the bag, you barely move to reach out and grab it. You put it in your mouth. You don't even have to chew it because it melts in your mouth, not in your hands. And all of a sudden you feel all of a sudden you have this sense that rises, comes over you in this moment as if it's a drug, a medicinal effect. Wow. And we wonder why it's hard to break this vicious cycle that's there, that now it throws the hormones off. It throws off all these messenger systems that then you have to go see Dr. Wood about inside of a moment's notice. And so I think that it begins. And so I'll end with this. It's so interesting that roughly about 10 plus years ago, they decided to do a campaign to just demonstrate the power of advertisement. And they went to advertisers and they said, I want you to pitch a campaign for broccoli. And they create this phenomenal campaign of broccoli versus kale. And all of a sudden the sales of broccoli went up, skyrocketed up based upon the campaign that was done, putting information in front of people. Wow. And so I think that in order for us to really change the dynamics, it's going to have to come from so many different fronts. It is going to take a village to truly change the dynamics of health that's hitting many communities of color. It's not going to take one avenue. It's going to take a multifaceted approach.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I
go
want to
ahead,
jump
Doc.
in there.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to give you guys this acronym HEAT, HEAT. So these are the things that push us to eat, right? These are the categories of things that push us to eat. So we eat because of habit. We
Okay.
eat because of emotions. We eat because of access, and we eat because of taste.
Come on.
And our environment panders to each one of those. So we're told that when you go to the movies, you should have popcorn. When you go hang out with your friends, you should go to, and I'm not going to Panera, you should go to Starbucks, and you guys should have a muffin and have some coffee. We're told that there are certain times of the day that you're supposed to eat. So there's this habit, and we've been cultured, we've been indoctrinated that you're supposed to eat something at a particular time. We eat because of emotions. We're tired, we're strained. My son actually, he was doing a project, and he was here, and he was frustrated because I kept, you got to do it over. It's not right. Let's do this. And so he got up and he walked into the kitchen, and my wife walked out behind him, and he went into the pantry, and she said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm going to get a bag of chips." And she said, "Why?" He said, "Because I'm just frustrated right now." And he's 14.
Wow.
Right? So we've been taught that we can eat our way through emotions. We don't want to sit with an emotion anymore. We eat because of access, because it's there, just because. There's nothing wrong. You're not hungry, you're not tired, but there's that candy, that juice, let me get some. And then taste, and as Dr. Baptiste said, they have created an environment. You guys may have heard of the bliss point, right? So where we have just enough sugar, just enough fat, and just enough salt to make you say, I can't just have one. And those are the things that we are fighting. So when we talk about how do we move past this, there is a systemic process out there. So it's not just us fighting the culture and what was done, but it continues to be done to us.
So following up on a couple of things that you guys mentioned. So Dr. Woode, you talked about that the education is not deep enough, that we need a little bit more education below the surface of what we typically get. And you talked about it being Eurocentric in many cases. So what do we do? So I go to my doctor, and my doctor prescribes something, a diet or something for me. I say, "Doc, is that for me? Is that for give me something that, can you cater that to me?" We used to hear a lot of times that we'd say doctors are not trained in nutrition. They're trained in medicine and in drugs and in this kind of thing. So how much confidence do we have, or should we have, in our doctor's nutritional advice to begin with, on one hand? And then Dr. Baptiste, you mentioned what was that last thing you were talking about? It got away from me. But let's start there, Dr. Woode. How do we? Okay, this isn't a nutritional prescription or advice that's given to me in my context. How do you get past that as a not as a practitioner, but as a patient? What do you do?
Well, as a patient, I think, wow, good question. Because I'm right now, as you were asking the question, I of course jumped into the practitioner mode. But I've got to remember also that I straddle the fence, right? Because I've been on both sides and am on both sides. And I remember going to my doctor, and him saying to me, "Hey, this is what I want you to do." And so I looked at the list of things that he wanted me to do, and he was actually treating me for blood sugars, for diabetes. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, this is exactly what I would tell a patient to do. I mean, it's the same thing, but it was absolutely the incorrect thing to do. Right? And when I say incorrect, it got us to the starting line, but it didn't take us all the way. And I think that's where we sometimes fall short, that we start the process. You got a patient who comes in and their blood sugars are 4 or 500, their A1C is 14. Immediately, you have got to do something to protect the patient. And so we do drugs or however we want to proceed with that. But we never come back and we never say, okay, now that we've plugged the hole, now that we've stopped the ship from going down, how do we move you to a more natural, more sustainable place where you don't begin developing additional issues? And so not only do we need to educate the patient, but I think it takes a lot of education for practitioners as well, because as you said, and Dr. Baptiste will testify to this, I think in medical school, as the endocrinologist, right? This is the guy who is going out to talk to people about diabetes, about obesity, about high blood pressure, and so forth. As the guy who's going to do that, I had one class in medical school in nutrition, and I
Oh,
had
wow.
a class in fellowship in nutrition.
Wow. Wow.
That was the extent of the training. But I think we are changing because we have people like Dr. Baptiste that's out there. We have folks who are out there beating the drum to say, no, we can't keep doing this. When I started practicing, we had I think just broken about 350 million people around the world with diabetes.
Wow.
We're now 460 million.
Mm.
In the US, 37 million with diabetes, 88 or 89 million who have prediabetes. I'm told by the year 2050 that 30 to 50% of everyone in the country, that's everybody, y'all, is going to be obese or pre-diabetic or diabetic. I mean, that's astounding that's where we are. So in terms of education, that's where we've got to be, not just educating the patient to say, hey, this is what we got to do, but the practitioners as well. One of the things that I've started doing is when someone walks into my office, I say to them, bring me pictures of your food.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
Wow.
wait a minute now.
Let's-
Doc, you're getting deep, Doc. Wow.
That's good.
And now let's change it around.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Dr. Beast, I did remember what I was going to ask, and then we'll move on. One of many things, you cited that there are lots of different factors that need to be changed, but you kind of spent a lot of time on the advertisements. So the answer to that, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very conservative Adventist home. We weren't allowed to watch certain things on TV, and if I'm going to tell you how Adventist I am. If they cussed on a TV show, Mama came and turned the channel or turned it off. If two people that weren't married got into bed with each other, turn the channel. So is that if the munchies or the bad food commercial comes on, is that what we're to change the channel? How do we do that if we're so inundated with these things that influence us in such a way? How are we trying to avoid that, or is it education? We educate our way out of those influences. How do we combat those influences that we don't choose the commercial, we choose the show, but those things come. We don't choose the billboard, we're just driving down the highway. How do we combat that? What do we do?
So I'm going to push back and I'm going to say two things. One is we do actually choose the commercial, and we do choose the billboard with our dollars. Those things follow the dollar trail. They follow the money trail. I mean, so once again, if you go through the concept of the business of business is business, when we were kids growing up, I grew up Adventist. I grew up with my mom making gluten. I grew up with like all that. So I know I'm not a pastor, but I grew up with that rich history. And what I can tell you is this: they didn't have any of these plant-based vegan foods like what they have now in the grocery stores. I'm from the generation where you had to shake that powder up to get your little milk product that you wanted, if you wanted to have something that wasn't real milk, right? You didn't go and get this prepaid. You may go to the ABC store or whatever it was, and you might get inside there and get your carob bars and everything else. But now it's all over. Everything has a label of plant-based on it. Why is that? Was it because of just their goodwill? because they just desire to change the environment and the health of people? No, it's money. Are the dollars spoke and set the direction from a groundswell? And so at the end of the day, money determines the great direction of it, along with everything else. But I'm going to ask you this one other question I want to push back on, and this is to you, pastors, and Dr. Woode. We talk about culture. Is Popeye? I wasn't going to use this, but some of these fast food places that we love to go to. Is that culture?
All
When I
right
talk
now.
about,
All right.
I mean, is it culture? Is it culture when I talk about Chick-fil-A or Popeyes or McDonald's or Burger King? I mean, is it culture when I talk about Domino's Pizza or I talk about Waffle House? Ouch, somebody, right?
Come on now.
Is that culture?
That's
So when we talk about culture is bridging and keeping us from making a change from our nutritional standpoint, is it really? Or is it assimilation into
Wow.
a predetermined culture that's present in some places and not in others?
There it is. Had to throw that. There it is.
All right.
Assimilation. All right.
Doc,
Wow.
man, you throwing darts at us, man. You throwing darts at us, Doc.
Oh my.
I want to jump on that comment, that question. Yeah. So one of the things to understand, right? One of the things to understand is, well, let me back up and ask a question. How long does someone have to be indoctrinated before the ability for them to switch, I guess, kind of automatically goes away? Like how long does it take for us to de-indoctrinate someone? Right? Is kind of the question. And when one of the questions I often ask, and sometimes I'm on some boards with some folks, and I call them the eat right people and the treat now people. Right? There are two groups.
Wow.
Okay.
And the eat right people say, well, if everybody would just eat right and get rest and drink water, then we wouldn't have all the issues that we have. And that's probably true. But once again, it goes back to the kind of idea of education. And I asked them, I said, well, why do you have a church? Why is there a church? Like, I've never shown up on Saturday and the church is boarded up and say, hey, no church today because everybody got better. But every week we come to church and the pastor says, don't lie, don't steal, be nice to each other, read your Bible. And then we go home and we come back the next week and he says, hey, don't steal, don't, right? So we go through the same thing. But it's kind of the same thing with food. The reason people are where they are is for the same reason that we have churches, that we are living in this environment that continues to plague us, continues to pull at us, continues to tug at those things that are in us, whether we are indoctrinated, whether it's culture, whether it's just brainwashing. I've got a guy who he's been eating this way for 70 years.
Wow.
Right? His mama cooked like that, his grandmama cooked like that, and this is what he tells me, right? My wife learned to cook like that, and then when she dies, I'm gonna cook like that, right? That's his thing. And so my question is always, how do we take that person, however right it may be, to say, hey, you got to eat right? Where do we begin with that guy? Right? At what point do we say, hey, let's change it, right? So that's the eat right people. And then the treat now people, which is on the other side, they're like, hey, we don't care what you do, just treat it. Give you some insulin, give you some whatever it is. And I think we've got to be somewhere between those two if we're going to bridge the gap, because what ends up happening is we end up alienating both sides. And then we get nowhere. So when we talk, when you go to churches, think about it. You go to churches and they're the people who say, you cannot bring any meat on the campus of the church. Right? And then they argue with the other people on the side that say, yeah, this is what we got to do. Well, I'm not advocating for either one, but the question that I'm asking is why we're all shooting for the same thing. We are all shooting for a good, healthy lifestyle where people can be healthy as long as possible, live as long as possible, get to heaven, right? Where do we start with that process? And I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to stop.
Yeah, let me jump
No,
in because
listen,
I love
you
this,
just
and
dropped the
I'm right
bomb.
there with. Yeah, I'm right there with you. So the one thing I say, and it's easy for me, I'm gonna use a description of what I do as a daily living. So my job as an interventional cardiologist is to try and stop heart attacks in their throes. And so I'm not going to tell someone who's on the table having a heart attack, you shouldn't have eaten that chicken. You should have put down that ham hock. You know, I'm going to give you this green juice and go home. No, I'm changing that tire. I'm putting a stent in, stopping the heart attack in his throes. But my job doesn't stop there. My job is then to teach them not to drive over nails, back up over the spikes, teach them to change the way so that way they don't have recurrent heart attacks. And so the only way that you accomplish that is not by fear, it's not by browbeating, it's not with a bat, it's by love, with love. It's with empathy, it's with understanding and meeting people where they're at. And I describe it this way. My job is to tell you the marathon is 26.2 miles. We're not running 26.2 miles tomorrow. Now, for some people, we may get out and jog 5 miles. Other people, we're going to do 100 yards. I need to tailor it according to the individual to bring you as close as possible towards that goal, keeping your eye on the prize. And I'm going to tell you one thing. The goal of health is not just so you can be healthy and look good and walk around Fort Lauderdale without a shirt on, right? The goal of getting healthy is so you can live a life of purpose. Right. So that way we can minister, we can do what we're supposed to, what we're actually on this earth and created to do. That's the reason for the health message. It's no other reason for the health message than that. Right? Because there's going to be a beginning. There's a beginning already. There's going to be an end for all of us. It's that in between that matters. And if you're not able to perform and walk and do the things you need to and live the life you're supposed to, how can you possibly minister? How can you possibly get out there and help those in need?
That's good. Good
Love
stuff.
it. Love it.
Listen, no, these are some very, very good points. And as you were talking, I know I have another question here, but I'm thinking, yes, dealing with the situation right in front of you, right? Just like you said, you're dealing with the patient. You're not going to tell them, hey, listen, stop eating that chicken. That's why you're here right now. You're going to deal with it. But you said that there's some work afterwards. The most authoritative figure, though, for, I'm just going to say most people, is the doctor, right? So if he or she is not taking it to the next step, what do we do? I mean, not every doctor is like you and like you. Some physicians, they're treating you, let's give you medication. Da, da. What do we do so that we might be able to take it to the next step?
Doctor steps out of the surgery room to get on a
Dr.
smoke
Woode.
break to come back and finish working. I mean, it's like,
Dr. Woode, can you answer that for me, doctor?
So I'm going to answer that. I want to tell you a story. I was in a room with a patient, and she was a large woman, probably about 300, 320 pounds. And we had struggled to get her A1C, her blood sugar, under control. And we'd done one thing or another. And finally, we got it under control. And we got her on some insulin. We got her on some other medications. And I'm going to say, I'm going to preface this by saying that this I would probably say my former life, right? And I was excited because I had achieved what they set out. I checked the boxes, I'd done all the things, and I was about to walk out the room, and the lady started crying. And her husband was there, and she said to him, or he said to her, he said, "Are you going to tell him? Are you going to talk to him?" And so I come back in the room, and I'm sitting there, and I was like, "What's going on?" And she said, "Dr. Woode, nobody ever talks about my weight." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, everybody tells me to get this blood sugar under control, but nobody ever talks about my weight. They tell me to go home and exercise and eat less." And she said, "I am so frustrated. I am so disappointed." She said, "I don't even turn the lights on when I get dressed at night. I just put my clothes in and I hop into bed, because if I look in the mirror, I wonder, who is that creature
Wow.
Wow.
that's staring back
Wow.
at me. And I'm going to tell you that I tell that story because that was probably the day that my treatment changed. My ability to continue doing things the way I had been doing them changed that day. Because I realized that I was doing what I was taught. I was doing the stuff that all the books say, all the articles say, all the studies tell me, all the insurance wants, but I was not really doing the thing that that patient needed and the thing that was going to get her where she needed to be. Now, in this case, we're talking about weight, right? But there are people out there that their A1Cs is great, and Dr. Baptiste will attest to this. We've got great blood sugars, but they have kidney problems. They've got heart attack. They're having strokes because we've treated the symptom, right? We've brought the blood sugar down, but we've not treated the underlying issue, which is the food and the lifestyle that they're in. And I don't think everybody has that kind of story or epiphany, but that's why I think I'm sure Dr. Batiste is out there doing what he does, and that's why I have kind of changed, and that's why I'm in the social space because
That's
nobody is saying the things that those patients need. Because that's not the thing that we do. That's not when we talk about MIPS and MAPR and all the whatever the acronyms are. When we get those incentives from CMS and from the Medicare and from the government, they don't tell us about, hey, are you really treating this patient holistically? All they're saying is the blood sugar good? And if you check that box, guess what? You get benefit. So and I let me just give a shout out to Dr. Batiste and Dr. Walsh for what they're doing, because I think there are not enough people out there that are beating that drum.
So Dr. Baptiste, and thank you for that, Dr. Woode. I mean, just giving us that overview that there are physicians, right, that are, taking you not just from where you are, but trying to help you, right, to achieve that ultimate goal and that overall health. So again, going to Dr. Batiste, again, for most people, the most authoritative figure is the doctor, right? And so when we talk about the role of the church, what role should the church play in the nutritional needs of its members? I mean, we have the doctor, and some doctors are not like where you all are today. And you have the church. What can the church do? Or what role should they even play in the nutritional needs of its members or the overall health of its members? Dr. Baptiste, and I'm going to go back to Dr. Woode. Go ahead.
So I'll think one, thank you for that question. I'll tell you that what studies are telling us on public health front, tide of chronic disease and health disparities until the healthcare system has collaborations with community-based organizations. At the forefront of community-based organizations are churches. Churches are trusted areas inside the community. And so we understand the perils of the church in terms of the membership that's really, it's decaying, it's dying off. And so I believe that on multiple fronts, the church has to once again embrace its purpose, as Christ did, in terms of healing, of forgiveness, and showing empathy to those who are sick and around them, and not judgmental in terms of their approach. And so this should be a resource of going to the church where now I can get healing here, both spiritual and physical. That now, once again, we're teaching you how to slowly move towards a healthier lifestyle. Now, what I would tell you is, you're right. Historically, physicians do garner an awful lot of prestige in the community. I would argue that maybe it's not so much right now, but the true value is found in our dietitians, inside of our nutritionists, and those individuals are the ones, as Dr. Woode already expressed. I had even less education than he had. I took what we call total peripheral nutrition, which means it's the white milky stuff you get when someone can't eat at all. It had nothing to do with actual true components of food and nutrition. And once again, I told you, I graduated from Loma Linda University, the Adventist Mecca, the Blue Zone. Oh, wow. I actually rounded with one of the lead authors from the Adventist Health Study never once really hearing about the power of nutrition. That was something on my own that I investigated and learned had a growing passion. So what I would tell you is the fact that we need to strategically tie ourselves to actionable community groups that can help support us. So maybe the church, if you don't have a dietitian or a health educator there, maybe you're able to collaborate and have someone who's there on a regular basis from the local county or another site of someone that can refer you. Maybe it can be joint in connection with others. We use this online platform continually, but we have to think outside the box, because I'll tell you something, and I'll end here, is the fact that I don't believe eating healthy costs more money. We go to places like Chipotle. I know I normally, in most shows, I never call out names, right? But I'm doing in this instance. We go to places like Chipotle and these other places say, oh, give me the brown rice, give me the white rice, give me this. We can do the same thing from the grocery store. You get your brown rice that's frozen or cooked, or get white rice for all that matters. You get your beans in a can. Yes, I say the can, BPA free. Rinse those beans off. You can get your tomatoes. You get your vegetables that are frozen. It won't go bad. You can make your own bowl at home where you control the ingredients. You make it healthy and tasty. You add the spices to it and bring that flavor out inside of it. And so there's a lot. That's my approach towards cooking. When I was doing my cooking classes, for my patients, I called it the cath lab. The cath lab is where I take patients to stop a heart attack in its throes. A cath lab is where I take patients in order to help them feel better. So I called it the cath lab, cooking alternative to health. We bring them in to change the direction of their health. That we go ahead and we give them how nutrition, and by eating onions, it's going to act like an antiplatelet effect. By having dark green leafy vegetables, it gives you dietary nitrates that dilate the vessels. That giving you beans and legumes are now that's going to give you resistant carbohydrates that help to process and lower that cholesterol and decrease the inflammation that's there. And so as I began to craft out meals, all of a sudden the eyes opened up of, I can actually eat like this. Yeah, it can be consistent with what I've done before in my culture of who I am. And so I think it takes one thing, which is a desire to put yourself in someone else's shoes, is what it will take for us to move this needle forward in terms of health.
Wow. Dr. Woode?
Thank you, Dr. Baptiste, for that. Thanks for the question. I agree. I think, well, let me just put my foot in it. So I remember there are these little red books that are on the shelf right here. That sometimes we use strategically, and sometimes we use it like a brick or a hammer. And I'm going to talk specifically for our church. I don't know about other churches, but there is so much value in what we have and what we know. And it is true that health has to be the right arm of everything that we do. Because if we're not healthy, as Dr. Baptiste said, you can't minister, you can't do those things. And so if we would, as a church, be more, a little bit more open to stepping into that space and saying, yes, we got the crusade. Yes, we've got the whatever other ministry, but let's make the health ministry, make it the best ministry. Give it all the money, right? And I think if we would just restructure our thought process a little bit, I think we can have a great impact, because the church has been the social mover. It's been the spiritual mover, and let's add a third one. Let's make it the health mover.
It's interesting. While we're there, and just before we go to our break, it has been my experience, and I think it's been many of our experiences, that when it comes to antagonism and pushback on what we understand as to be the Adventist health message or the health message in those little red books, there's nobody that kicks it harder than we do. I have sat in Adventist hospital leadership meetings where the Adventist the Adventist administrators and staff have been pushing one way, and the non-Adventist staff has reached down, pulled out one of those red books and said, but this is what you guys say. And it's like,
Come on,
you
man.
wonder, why is it that we are the ones who create the most pushback and the stumbling blocks to engaging our own health message? We're gonna give you guys a little second to think about that, but we're gonna take a quick break and come back. But I do want to hear your thoughts on that, as we dig a little deeper, coming up. And listen, for the rest of you that have just joined us tonight, we want to say thank you so much for joining us here at the Pastors Roundtable. Wow, we have been hearing, gentlemen, some very, very interesting and intriguing, titillating stuff tonight, on slave food and the Black church and the Black community. But before we jump back into that, Roger, every single edition of the PRT, we have had great information. We've been exposed to so many things that make a huge difference. Where can somebody who's joining us now find more?
Listen, if you are enjoying tonight's episode, you can go to the PRT.live website. You will have every episode from the Pastors Roundtable, along with some show notes, which are the resources from each show, and you are able to watch them over and over again. Yes, we know that they're on YouTube. Yes, we know they're on Facebook. But the problem with YouTube and Facebook is that you got to go search for them. But if you go over to the Pastors Roundtable, the PRT.live, you will find them all there waiting for you and easy access to what's happening. And while you're there, you are welcome to share in supporting the Pastors Roundtable. We know that if you are enjoying what you're enjoying, you want to see it flourish and shared more and more. And so we invite you to go down to the bottom of the website page, click on the support, and you are welcome to share your support to the Pastors Roundtable.
All right. And Dr. Henry, man, here we go, man. We got just about 20 something minutes left. Is it too late for people to?
No, Pastor Paul, it is not too late. Look, we've been learning a lot about the way we eat. Listen, I had to write some notes, man. I'm learning that there's something called HEAT, acronym HEAT. That's habit, emotion, access, that's right, and to taste. Listen, they're teaching us that we got to take it one step further. We go to the doctor and they tell us, how to get better and what to do, but they're talking about taking it another step further, having this overall plan so that we can start to live healthier, so that we can live on purpose. I think I heard that, live on purpose. So again, please, this is the time that you need to share this feed. Share it to someone who's sick. Share it to someone that needs a different lifestyle, a lifestyle change. Share it, because I believe that this episode will change your life.
I saw somebody in the chat say churches should practice. Wait, that's not it. I heard that. There it is. Rochelle Parker says, I'm going to put this one up. She says, for the most part, Adventist churches and pastors aren't promoting the health message. Most pastors, okay. Yeah, share it with your pastor. I think that's what she's saying.
Why you gonna start mess? Come on.
Hey, I didn't start it. I just read it. That's all. But listen, again, thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a lot more in store. We're going to just hop right back in and bring our guest right back. Tonight, we are joined at the Pastors Roundtable by Dr. Columbus Baptiste. I keep putting that P in there. And Dr. Dwain Woode. Both of them some excellent practitioners and educators, both in the hospital room and as well as in the virtual space. Both
Mhm.
of them spending a lot of time educating, both outside of the hospital, outside of the doctor's room, but also in the spaces like similar to what we're in now. We are grateful for their participation here at the Pastors Roundtable tonight. Okay, gentlemen, we kind of left with a kind of edgy question there. Why is it that sometimes church folk to whom we believe God gave us a health message, but in the Bible, why is it sometimes that it seems like church folk push back the most, or even if it's not the most, they push back really hard when it comes to trying to educate or trying to engage a health message on a practical level?
I'm going to let Dr. Baptiste handle that one first.
Well, what I'll say, thank you a lot, Dr. Wood, for that. What I'll say is there's nothing new under the sun, as the scripture tells us. And so I think if we look back at what the scripture tells us about the Israelites who received manna, if you look at those who saw Christ in their face, they still somehow, human nature, we tend to move away from things that are true. And it's the others who are hungry. I found that from my own, I'll call it health ministry, that when I go into non-Adventist churches, the hunger that's there for the knowledge, for the information, it's infectious.
Wow.
And it keeps us wanting to go back more and more and more. And, that doesn't mean, just like Dr. Wood said earlier, we go to church and we hear a powerful message that directs us back towards Christ each week that we go, but it still is given. And that still call to accept Christ is put forth before us. We have to still do the same thing with our own too as well. And we have to realize that there's humans in the church. There's going to be flawed people in the church. And just like the comment that you're saying, I was laughing about that you read about, give it to the pastors. What I would say, my only request for pastors is this, and I can say it as not being a pastor, is no judgment on what a pastor eats, but I do have concerns if we joke about the health message from up front, and then we minimize the importance of the health message. That, I think, that could be a bit concerning. And I don't mean it from a standpoint of being a zealot, because I still practice traditional medicine. I don't force my kids, who are now 19 and 17, to eat. I'm trying to teach them at this point based on the habits and by example of what I've done. After, when they were smaller, it was a little bit more forced. So that's what I would say as it relates to the church and everything of that sort.
All right.
Dr. Wood.
Yeah, I think perhaps we misunderstand the place that the health message should be in what we do. It is, and let me see. Okay, I'm just
going to say I
think we spiritualize the health message too much. I think we take it and we make it a salvific issue. It's if you are not doing this, or if you're doing this, then it's taking you out of heaven. Now, can it influence the mind? Can it influence your ability to work with the spirit? Yes, it can, because that's the point of a lot what we do. But we've got to understand that the health message, one of the purposes of the health message, is to get people into the space physically and mentally so that they can have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Because if your mind is not there, if your body is not there, if you can't function, then the last thing on your mind is Jesus and his soon coming.
Yeah.
And so I think if we think of it in that way, we have a larger understanding and appreciation for it, and we don't nitpick as much when someone is not following the 100 things that are on that page. My goodness, they're doing 20 out of the 100. Let's be happy that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was going to say what you're sharing here is encouraging to me. I am I am a diabetes sufferer. I have diabetes, and I've been struggling with it for a long time. And a lot of people say to me, "Well, Roger, you can reverse it by going full vegetarian." But it's a tough situation to do that. I remember when my wife and I just got to Huntsville, and we tried the vegetarian process, but obviously, yeah, we went to the processed vegetarian meals. We could not economically keep that up, so we had to go back to do what we used to do. So one of the things that back then we didn't talk about the access that we have to options. And I'm only hearing it now. Just yesterday, we went to an opening of a health clinic where they talked about not only is healthcare scarce for certain communities, but also food. There are food deserts that are out there. These are terminologies that we don't think about, we don't hear. What are some of the things, as we're looking at the environments in which we're living in, environments, cities, or some of us, move to different areas? What are some of the things we need to be keeping in mind when it comes to those things? Because we don't
Hey,
normally think
Raj,
about
just before you get to
that.
that, I wanted to kind of mention something and point out a couple of comments here in the chat to the previous question. Lynn says this, Lynn J, knowledge shared incorrectly can cause rebellion. And I think that to the previous question, a lot of times what we see in our churches is the pushback comes from the way that it can be presented. And sometimes it's harsh, sometimes it's judgmental, sometimes it's ignorant of people's real life situations in their homes, as far as access, as far as education, the expectations that we place without the education. All of those things can have some factors to it. And Dr. Wood, I would give I'm not gonna say push back, but even a different spin to the words that you use. Sometimes you say we over spiritualize it, and I would say that in that sense in which you said, as far as connecting it in every sense to salvation, sure, but I think other times we under spiritualize it, or we don't spiritualize it enough. In other words, I'm trying to lose weight, but it's just a health thing. So I'm not going to ask God's help. I'm just going to work really hard and try to do it on my own. I'm going to try to make these dietary changes and do stuff that are like huge lifestyle changes, but it's not really a spiritual thing. This is just me, about me and my health. It has nothing to do with God. So I'm not bringing him into it. And I think a lot of times people go that route by under spiritualizing it and not saying, God, I need help with this stuff. This is I can't do this on my own. So I think you've got both ends of that sometimes cause some of the our inability as a church to embrace some of the habits and some of the knowledge that we do have.
I just want to jump in, and I apologize. I always say I'm not going to do this, but just to share a little bit of the research I did in preparation for my book, Selfish, is that when we look at this, and you brought up spirituality and that concept as it relates to our health, we have to understand that when we engage in prayer and we engage in meditation, reflection on Christ and his power, studies have shown and demonstrated that there is an increase in our prefrontal cortex thickening. That's where we reason. That's where our planning occurs. That when we engage in these areas, we tone down the fear center, the amygdala, the limbic system that causes us to react and respond. So that means that as we begin this process of praying, and they've done studies and they look at what's called functional MRIs to look at which areas of the brain highlight in individuals and showing them, and specifically alcoholics and others, and showing temptation to them before and after they engage in prayer. And seeing the difference of what abounds, it's mind-boggling. There's a whole science that tells us about the power that we're leaving at the table. We're just choosing. I mean, it's a reason why the scripture says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you, right? So there's a reason for that. And we can't neglect or separate the two as we're going down this road, nor can we separate the church from playing a role in terms of the health of the community.
Good. All right.
I love it.
And Dr. Peace, isn't it interesting now that you mentioned prayer? Isn't it interesting
So
now that the entire world is talking about fasting? So prayer and
Wow.
fasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Pay
right.
oh,
attention to
That's
fasting.
right.
good, good, good point. Good point. And listen, just before we end, what I was trying to get us to begin to share is, as we are beginning to move from place to place to get involved in, we would like the Jeffersons moving on up. What are some of the things we need to keep in mind when we're looking at the environment that we find ourselves in? What are some things you would help us so that we can begin to be healthier?
Dr. Will, I'll
In the
let you go
chat,
first, Dr. Wood.
talking about sunlight. Thanks, Dr. Peace. One of the and we sometimes poo-poo this and we make jokes about it, but those laws of health that we talk about should guide us in the
My,
things that we do. I mean, when we're moving, wherever we're going, what is the best place that we can go where we can be outside, where we can get sunlight, where we can have water, where we can meditate, where all those new start, that whole idea. And I think that is what we need to begin thinking about and incorporating. So as you're moving, as you're thinking about where you're going to be, you look to see, are there places where you can start a little garden, right? Maybe get a smaller house so you can have a space in the yard where you can plant something. Don't get the largest house that takes up the entire piece of property, right? So begin thinking about those things. As you're thinking about where you're going to move to somewhere where you have a good local church, where you can have community, because community is, after all, the thing that helps us most in terms of the support that we're going to need, because it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to build a family, and it takes a village, y'all, sometimes to stay in the church. Right? All of us together have to be there. So I think us having an open mind in terms of okay, this is how we've done it for the longest while. To Dr. Baptiste's point, there's something we've been taught, we've been indoctrinated this way. Be open to say, okay, there should be and there must be a different way for us to do this, not just for us to continue taking medications and being the way we are. And I'll stop there.
Dr. Baptiste?
Yeah, not a lot to add to that, except what I would chime in is this is the main reason why we're doing the HELP conference, the Health Equity Longevity Project in Huntsville, March 24th through 26th. Yeah, I'm throwing a plug out there because I think it's powerful. So beyond really the concept of looking at what is transpiring inside of our communities, the state of health in the African American community from cradle to grave, maternal infant mortality that's hitting. Do you realize the fact that number one killer of women is cardiovascular disease inside of that maternal period of time? Right? The causes of pregnancy, deaths, and so forth. And so when we look at all the situations there, diabetes, of coronary disease, of Alzheimer's and mental health, those are the things we're addressing. But the part that I love the most that can really give us information is, what is the role of the church? What's the role of places of faith in rebuilding, revitalizing the community? Health? What's the role of place of higher education? What's the role of businesses? And so when we're looking at all these different facets, the idea is for us to come together. Dr. Wood, myself, the pastors, we're not going to all have the answers. It's going to be a collective effort. It is literally going to take a village to change it. When we look at the historical aspect of how our communities were bisected and dissected, right? We look at the fact of highways going through and eminent domain, and all of the stress, the pollution, the air quality, the noise, all these factors, science is telling us more and more, create a stressful environment that increase our burden, our risk of the number one killer, which is heart disease. And diabetes is a form of heart disease, I'd like to say, Dr. Wood, and so when we look at all this in combination, these endocrine disrupting factors that are there in the products in our water and inside the substances that are put inside of our stores and our local groceries, we have to become educated. We talked about this already, and empower change to happen in our communities if we're ever going to make progress that we want to make.
Okay.
Wow, listen, we are learning so much here on this show. You all have really been pouring into us. Again, I'm writing some notes. Significance of fasting. I think you said something, Pastor Wood, about that, and others. But as we begin to close, what are some of the additional resources that our viewers can find on this topic of the Slave Food Project, or maybe a direction on where we can go, as church leaders to provide resources for our members, our congregants, and for us, so that we can live that healthier lifestyle? I want to go to Dr. Wood first.
Oh, there are. Thank you for that question. And once again, gentlemen, thank you for having me on and having me with such an illustrious guest as Dr. Baptiste. Glad to be here. So there are a lot of books out there about slave food. Of course, I want to point you back to Dr. Baptiste's program and Dr. Walsh. But books like, High on the Hog, which is an exploration of the journey from African food to soul food. There's the slave food, right, which is a book, Cooking Green, right, Cooking Green. And so lots of resources that are out there, and then a shameless plug. So this year, right, we have started a new series on our show. It's called New Year, New You. And the goal of it is to see how we can get people off of their diabetes medication. It's an entire year, right? It's a free service. It's on there. We do the live every week. And that's the goal, because we want to make sure that people are not just doing the things to get that number where it needs to be, but they're doing the things they need to do so they can be healthy for the rest of their lives. So all those resources are there, and we'd love to be back with you guys at some point.
Oh, awesome. Listen, we want you to know, Dr. Wood, we love shameless plugs. We want our guest, our audience to know what our guests are doing and putting out there. So we keep them coming, those shameless plugs. We want to direct them to you.
Yeah.
And we believe in what you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Baptiste.
Before you share, Dr. Baptiste, Dr. Wood, you talked about the show High on the Hog, and that is also a YouTube series, or a Netflix series. I mean, it's a Netflix series where it does explore the very things you shared. And could you tell us when your show is on so that we can catch it?
Yeah, our show is on every Monday at 7 p.m. Central. And it's Dwain Woode, MD. That's DWAIN WOODE MD. You can search on any social media platform and you'll find us with that handle.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Baptiste, share with us.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure being back on the show with you all, and especially having an opportunity to join Dr. Woods on this broadcast. One of the things I tell you is just be open. There's a lot of books out there. There's just so many different ones that are out there, and it really depends upon what actually resonates with you. I mean, if you want information along this line, Mayor Eric Adams, who's doing incredible work out of New York City, has a book called Health at Last. And it really encompasses his journey, that he taps into a lot of the stress that we talk about in the Slave Food Project, a lot of the food disparities and food insecurities that are there. He talks about all those things and relates them back to our historical stance. And I think that's a good starting point. You can look at books like Tracy McQuirter and By Any Greens Necessary is a great book. Obviously, going to Dr. Wood's site too as well. I believe wholeheartedly that this journey towards health is not something that is simply tied solely to food. And so as a small teaser for it, that's why I wrote the book Selfish, because it's a reflection of what I would tell my patients over the years that I've practiced. And so the S stands for spirituality. The E stands for exercise. Yes, exercising faith, but actually moving something a little bit. The L stands for love, true love, in terms of it being a verb, an action word, forgiveness and gratitude, the power that it has to impact on the vessels lining your heart, your blood flow to the heart too as well. Obviously, the central component is food, real food, whole food, plant-rich food. I stands for intimacy of relationships and the power that has for us as a community. The S stands for sleep, a day of rest, vacationing, time away of resetting. And the H stands for happiness, humor, joy of life. And so I reflect on how each of those pillars plays a unique role in decreasing your stress and improving your heart function and blood flow. That's why it's a cardiologist's guide to healing a stressed and broken heart. So that's dropping in April at drbaptiste.com. But the main issue is there's 1,000 things. That message is something that we've preached about inside of the church for centuries. And so I say your number one value resource is going to the church and finding someone who is cooking, who cooks well, and can be your mentor, and make sure it tastes good. If it smells good, it tastes good, because that's when digestion begins, when you start to smell it.
All right now. Yes.
That was good.
All right. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you so very much. We appreciate what you have brought to the Pastors Roundtable tonight. Our audience, I think, have been very much edified and inspired to dig a little deeper. We thank you for the work that you've done here, not just tonight at the Roundtable, but what you do week in and week out, both in your line of work and in the social media space. Dr. Baptiste, I think the same question that Pastor Wade asked for Dr. Woode about, are you doing stuff in the digital space as well that we can make our audience aware of?
We're periodically putting things out on Slave Food on YouTube, Slave Food Project on YouTube. I actually do a monthly show on Chef AJ's channel for right now until I launch my separate YouTube channel. So if any of you follow Chef AJ, who does plant-based nutrition, I do a monthly show on her channel as well.
All right. Well, we will look to do our best to put some of those links and those resources in our show notes for today's show that you can find on our website, prt.live. And again, gentlemen, thank you so much. Roger?
Well, listen, thank you again. Thank you to our viewers. Thank you to our guests. What an interesting conversation and challenging conversation, because all of us need to make some changes in our diet. So we're just so thankful for being here. And we want to let you know that next week we'll be back at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, as we pick up our next topic in the Pastors Roundtable Black History Series. Thank you for joining us. As you have joined us to help make ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real. God bless.
Take care, everybody.